Good evening. I wanted to take a moment of your time, if I could, to discuss the events of yesterday in Tucson, Arizona, the tragic assassination attempt of a sitting congressperson, and probably more so to discuss the reaction to that horrible tragedy that's come about in the last 24 to 48 hours. First of all, let me be up front with you and apologize, I suppose, for the lack of presentation that you're going to see here. Apologize for the audio and that kind of thing. This entire situation has been so quickly unfolding, and the reaction to it has been so vociferous and been so quick to come out that I didn't really feel that I had time to go and put a bunch of bells and whistles on this presentation or put a bunch of graphics or anything like that. I'll apologize for the audio in advance. This is an extremely rough presentation. This is one take, and I know it looks like it's just some guy in his basement, and that's because it is. But I wanted to get my 2 cents on this out there as quickly as I could. So I'm assuming you will bear with me in terms of the roughness and the lack of polish to this presentation that you're about to see. Yesterday, when the news of what happened in Tucson started to come down, I suppose I reacted to it like a good number of you did. I had gotten home from running a few errands around town. I got in, I turned on the TV, and the first thing I heard was that there had been a shooting and an assassination attempt on a sitting member of the House of Representatives in Tucson, Arizona. And like most of you, or a lot of you, and I suppose it's something that a good number of us do these days when any sort of breaking story happens, the first thing I did was to go into my office and fire up the internet and go into the different news sites, message boards, and whatever to see what kind of information was out there, to see what kind of opinion was out there, what the reactions of the people were at that time. I think one of the great things about the time that we live in right now is the fact that when anything is happening, any major world event is happening, you can get instantaneous reaction from people, and you can know where the pulse of Americans are at any given moment. That's a luxury that we've never had in any generation until this one. So I suppose, like I have and many of you have for a lot of different news stories, I went out there and tried to just see what the pulse of the nation was while I was trying to find out what exactly was happening. As the time went on, and as I went and looked at what I was seeing out there in the different message boards and blogs and news sites and wherever else, I quickly became sickened, though not necessarily surprised, at the reaction that many on the left were putting out there. Very early in the tragedy, before we knew who was involved or even how many people were involved, before we knew anything about the details of the event, all we knew was that a couple people had passed away and that there was someone in the hospital. We knew nothing beyond that point. I saw lefty after lefty out there saying things like, well, Sarah Palin is unelectable now, or congratulations, Sarah Palin, this is what you deserve. Making a very immediate connection between whatever was going on in Arizona, the details of which we didn't even know at that time, making a connection between that and Sarah Palin. Now, I know the left doesn't like Sarah Palin. Okay, that's kind of old news. We all are aware of that. But to just immediately put that out there as your first reaction with absolutely no proof, no specifics to go on, other than she had like one ad on her website one time that you didn't like, that had some crosshairs in it, that tells us who the left really is. And that tells you how sick and demented these people are. Now, as the day went on, and by the day went on I mean just maybe a couple of hours after the tragedy, when we started to find out a little bit more about this sociopath who perpetrated these heinous actions, again, I'm like a lot of you were. It came out that there was a YouTube channel with his rantings on there, and I was like you. I still wanted to get an explanation for why someone could do something like this. So I went to that site. I went through a lot of his presentations and a lot of his rants, if you will, and tried to make some kind of sense of it. I'm still bloody confused over whatever that guy was talking about, and have no idea where he was coming from. Frankly, I don't think he has any idea where he's coming from either, if I can be obliged to play dime store psychologist for a couple of minutes. But nevertheless, once that started happening, then the missive on the left slowly started to go from, okay, well, this is Sarah Palin's fault, to, well, this is the fault of the level of political discourse that we have in this nation. They immediately tried to make the connection between the heated level of political discourse that we've seen over the last couple of years in America and connect that to this horrible tragedy. Fast forward to Sunday morning, and a lot of the Sunday morning news shows, or the panel shows that come on all the channels, some of the opinion pieces in the New York Times and a few other places, and they really ratcheted up that idea that somehow the level of political discourse in America today is to blame for what happened yesterday. Now think about that for a second. Some sociopath, idiot, crazy person, whatever you want to call him, commits these heinous acts. And by reviewing his own words, he's so far out there that you can't identify him with any political movement at all. I mean, you'd read one line from him that would make him sound like an extreme leftist. You'd read another line that made him sound like he was an extreme conservative. You'd read another line that made you think he was from Pluto. This guy was coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. But yet, somehow, the level of political discourse in this nation, all the name-calling and everything else that we do, somehow contributed to that. I very much would like to see some leftist or some commentator on the left or some pundit on the left try to make some connection between whatever it was that was in this guy's head and the political discourse, the commentary, the analysis, the opinions that are debated each and every day on cable television, talk radio, blogs, television, the internet, anywhere. Show me where there's a connection. Because I'm convinced as it stands right now that this sociopath was not connected to reality in any way, shape, or form. There is no connection that we can see right now between this, whatever he was, and the level of political discourse in this country right now. So clearly what is happening is that there are those on the left who feel it necessary or feel that it's an opportunity to use this tragedy as a method of quelling the fires of political debate in this country. They're using this as an excuse for to convince people, or force people even, to simmer down a little bit when it comes to politics. Now, when I think about it, and I look back on the last couple of years of American history, and I look at how political discourse has ratcheted up a bit, and how it's no longer the polite debate that it used to be, that we no longer can agreeably disagree. And I look at how that has evolved over that time, I actually think that the change in political discourse is one of the most positive things that's ever happened to our nation. Now, I know a lot of you are hearing me say that statement, and you're scratching your head and you're saying, okay, you're nuts. You've lost it. Let me explain what I mean. When I go back to the time when I was growing up, and to give you a frame of reference, that would have roughly been the 1980s. You know, I'm in my mid-30s, so mostly the 1980s. And then into the time I became a young adult and was able to first vote in the early 1990s. There seemed to be a rather pronounced perception of apathy among most of the American people. Sure, we would pay attention to presidential elections and maybe a congressional election here or there if it was particularly contentious, but by and large, people, Joe Average, Joe Sixpack, really didn't pay attention to the day-to-day goings-on of politics. Really couldn't tell you what happened from one day to the next in Congress. Really didn't know who was contending for offices in the primary season. Really wasn't involved in in what was happening on the local level, the grassroots level. You know, they'd show up at the polls once every 4 years, maybe once every 2 years, and cast a vote, but beyond that, there was really no connection to the process. And make no mistake, when I criticize that mentality, I'm pointing the finger at myself as much as I am anyone. All right? It's only been the last 5 or 6 years that I personally have taken a heavy interest in this, as I think a lot of other Americans have as well. So I'm placing that kind of criticism at my own doorstep as much as I am any of you. And we were always told, whenever you would hear pundits of that time talk about the issue, that, man, we really need to get the American people interested in politics, and we really need to get over this culture of apathy that's out there, and we really need people to take a more pronounced interest in their politics and the day-to-day goings-on of government. But they didn't do that because at the time, many people didn't believe that the goings-on of government affected them on a profound basis, or that it affected them on a day-to-day basis. So it really wasn't worth paying attention to. That was their perception of the issue, and my perception of the issue as well. But a funny thing happened. With the dawning of the internet, with the dawning of cable TV news, and indeed with the opportunity for people to have their voices heard in a way that they'd never been heard prior to the dawning of the internet, people did start to take notice of government. People did start to take notice of what was going on. And indeed, more and more people have at least some level of knowledge of what is happening in government. Whatever side of the fence they're on, more people, I would argue, more people are better informed today than they've ever been in the past. There is, at your fingertips at any given moment, a virtually unlimited amount of information, analysis, opinion, discussion, debate at your fingertips than there has ever been. And I believe a higher number of people are taking advantage of that than they ever have. I think that's a very positive thing. But what a lot of people don't realize or overlook is that when you have such a high percentage of the American people that are now paying attention where they were not before, when you have a high amount of the American people that have political opinions of some kind where they really didn't 20 years ago, you are going to have heated debate. You are going to have heated rhetoric. You are going to have argument. You are going to have threats. You are going to have, people crossing the line every once in a while. And while that's, while I would never advocate violence or property damage or anything like that, I think we understand that on some level, when you have this level of interest, some of that is going to happen. That's just part of being a human being. It just is. But I wouldn't trade that to go back to the time when by and large Americans didn't care what happened in Washington. When by and large people couldn't tell you who the congressman was. Or when by and large people said, it doesn't matter who I vote for, they're all the same. I remember being in college and hearing people say, I don't know if I'll go vote or not. If I do vote, maybe I'll vote for Clinton because he played the saxophone in Arsenio Hall, he must be a cool guy. When I was first voting my first election, that was the level of thought that my friends put into politics. You'd never see that today, or very rarely see it. People care what's going on in Washington. People have opinions about what's going on. People debate it. People talk about it in mixed company now. They talk about it at work. They talk about it in the break room. They talk about it at the barbershop. They talk about it at the grocery store. There used to be a time where it was frowned upon for people to discuss politics in mixed company, but that time has passed, and I think that's positive. I welcome that time.